It's time to make our big push to 1,000 subscribers. Once we get to 1,000, the Gold and Blue Dude Army will be unstoppable. Let's go. What's going on, everybody? It's me again, Gold and Blue Dude, and if you haven't already, go ahead and hit the like and subscribe button. I do videos every single day, sometimes college football or sometimes college basketball. The best way to support this channel and get more of my content is hit the subscribe button. This is a daily grind. Every day, videos, every day, something new, trying to stand out, trying to be different. It's a grind. But as days turn into weeks, and weeks turn into months, and I just passed my year, I look at my subscriber base and it's over 800. That's not a lot compared to the big channels, but for me, 800 is a big deal. We're making our final push to 1,000 subscribers. Honestly, I thought it would take a lot longer to get where we're at and be what we are. So first of all, I wanted to thank all my current subscribers and then say, let's push to 1,000. I'll do my part, make the videos, promote it on any platform I can think of. I need my subscribers to do their part and spread it word of mouth, over the phone, over the internet, however you can do it. Let's spread this thing and get to 1,000 and reinvest into the channel and give you the best quality videos possible. Now let's get into the ranking of the Power 5 conferences going into the 2021 season. Number 5, dead last, you guessed it, the Pac-12. There are two teams that give the Pac-12 a fighting chance to get into the playoffs in 2021. The first one, Washington, who I thought was the best team in the Pac-12 last year. They just got bit very, very hard by the COVID bug and couldn't get into Pac-12 championship. Most of that team will be back. I do expect Washington to win the Pac-12 North. In the Pac-12 South, Arizona State, Jalon Daniels will be a Heisman Trophy contender, and I expect Arizona State to win the Pac-12 South. But beyond those two, I think USC and Utah will have enough to compete with Arizona State for the Pac-12 South. But USC needs to be more consistent. As far as the Pac-12 North, I do think Oregon will be better. I just think Washington will be a step above them next year. 2022 is the year that I'm really keeping my eye on Oregon. I think 2021 belongs to Washington as far as the Pac-12 North. Beyond that, Colorado, they have a good offense, but their defense is nowhere to be found. Not enough to contend. UCLA, they'll take a step forward. Brian Kelly doing a great job over there, but not enough to contend. Stanford shows flashes of potential. They could get it all together. Maybe they could contend for the Pac-12 North. I just don't see it right now. I don't know what to think about Cal other than they're boring, uneventful. They have some talent, but they don't really do anything with it. Oregon State, Washington State, and Arizona, they're just playing bad. One of the worst teams in the nation. And the worst of the worst, Arizona. I don't know what they need to do over there, but they are the doormat of the Pac-12. Number 4, the Big 12. Look, Oklahoma, I expect Oklahoma to bulldoze Big 12 in 2021. Their offense is going to be great, led by Spencer Rattler. He's going to be a Heisman Trophy contender. Kennedy Brooks will be back, and Mario Williams, the talented wide receivers, will be there too. But Oklahoma will have a great defense as well. Their defensive coordinator, Alex Grinch, has the defense in Norman looking very, very legit. I expect Oklahoma to trailblaze through the Big 12, maybe pick up one loss and get to the playoffs. There's two teams that could give them the most trouble. The first one, Iowa State. Why? They return a ton of talent, especially Brock Purdy and Breece Hall on offense. I do think Iowa State's defense needs to improve just a little bit. They had some up and down moments in 2020. Pretty good, but needs to be a little bit more consistent. Right with them is going to be Kansas State. Look, Kansas State will be under the radar, but their head coach, Chris Klieman, he knows the roadmap to championships. He came from North Dakota State. Skylar Thompson, their talented dual threat quarterback, he should be healthy by the beginning of 2021. And Kansas State's schedule isn't that bad. So I think Kansas State could be the surprise of the Big 12 in 2021. The next tier, that would be where my team comes in, West Virginia. And they'll benefit from Texas and Oklahoma State dropping. I do expect those two teams to drop. I'll explain that in a minute. I think West Virginia takes a step forward, not a big one. They'll have an experienced quarterback, Jarrett Daggy, to lead the way, and if he has trouble, he has talented backups in Garrett Green and Will Crowder. They're new to the scene. They'll need some playing time to get in rhythm and catch the speed of the game, but at least we know it isn't do or die with Jarrett Daggy. Our running game should be legit. Our talented running back, Letty Brown, he'll be back. Our offensive line should be intact, and our recruiting class is adding some 4-star talent to that offensive line. Really, the only biggest hit was on defense, and that was on the defensive line with Darius Steele opting to go to the NFL. Other than that, I think our defense is going to be great, especially our secondary. Our secondary might be the best in the Big 12. Still got to figure out some holes on the linebacking side, but other than that, we're good to go on defense. West Virginia should be great against the pass in 2021. And the next group, I have Oklahoma State, Texas, and TCU kind of in the same bunch. The big thing for Texas is they lose a lot. Well, for one thing, they fired Tom Herman, and they lose Sam Ehlinger. So yes, I do expect Texas to take a step back. For Oklahoma State, Mike Gundy does not seize opportunities. Last year was probably the most talented team that Mike Gundy had at Oklahoma State. What happened? He didn't even contend for the Big 12 championship. If anybody thinks that something different is going to happen this year, you're fooling yourselves. I actually think they'll take a step back. I also have TCU in that bunch because Gary Patterson is a great coach, but it just seems like he's lost his magic. Can he regain his magic? That's a question that'll be answered in 2021. Then the next tier, Texas Tech and Baylor. I do expect those two teams to be better, but they don't have the talent or the coaching to take a major step forward. So the question is, will they be able to make a bowl? Last year, way down from everybody else is Kansas, and yes, they will remain the doormat of the Big 12, probably not winning one single conference game in 2021. Number 3 going into 2021. This one might surprise you. The Big 10. First, we start with Ohio State. They lose too much on offense. Quarterback Justin Fields, wide receiver Chris Olave, running back Trey Sermon, to not take a step backwards. They are going to take a step backwards, but I still think that Ohio State will have a 10-win season. So they'll still have a good season. I think the surprise team could be Penn State. I think the Nittany Lions bounce back in a big way. James Franklin is a great coach, and we're forgetting that in 2020, on top of COVID, they were dealing with some big opt-outs, some big holes to fill that they couldn't quite get figured out. Well, it's been a year, so I think they figured it out. I think the defense will actually be one of the best in the Big 10. Quarterback Sean Clifford, he will be back to prove something, and he will have weapons. The biggest hurdle for Penn State to get over in 2021 is actually the Big 10 road slate. They have one of the toughest road slates in the Big 10 in 2021. If they can manage that, they'll be right up there with Ohio State in contention for the Big 10 East. Next here, I have Indiana and Michigan. I have Michigan kind of taking a step forward and Indiana taking a step backwards, and then kind of being even, if that makes sense. The reason I think Michigan will be better is Jim Harbaugh just got a fire lit up under his rear end. I think he's going to have more success this year, not contend for the Big 10 or the playoffs or a national championship, but get to a bowl. In Indiana, man, their schedule is just too brutal. They get Cincinnati, Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan, and Purdue. They're going to take a step back. Maryland, Rutgers, and Michigan State will be tough outs in the Big 10 East, but I still expect for them to remain in the bottom. Out of those 3 teams, the one team that I'm keeping my eye on is Rutgers. Greg Schiano is bringing back his old school mentality from the Big East, and it looked like he was starting to figure things out at the end of the 2020 season. Will that translate to a bowl bid? I'm not sure. In the Big 10 West, I think it's going to be between Iowa and Wisconsin. Both of these teams will be loaded in 2021, and both of these teams have incredible home field advantage, even with COVID. I think the biggest potential jumper in the Big 10 West could be Purdue. They have a lot of experience and a lot of talent coming back, but they do have the toughest schedule in the Big 10. Can they at least split those really, really tough games 50-50? The next tier in the Big 10 West is going to be Northwestern and Minnesota. Yes, I expect Northwestern to take a pretty sizable step backwards. Number one, their schedule is going to be much bigger. Number two, their offense, non-existent last year. Their quarterback, Ramsey, he's gone. He wasn't really all that good, but he's not there anymore. And you can't rely on your defense to get you through a 12-game season. That's too much to ask for them, and it's not going to happen. Combine that with Minnesota's dry land of talent. I think that's what will allow Purdue to make the jump that they can make. Nebraska. I do think Nebraska will be better, but I don't think that their record will prove that dramatically. They get at Oklahoma out of conference. That's horrible. They drew Ohio State from the East. That's rough. It is at home. But the one saving grace is most of their games are at home besides that road trip to Oklahoma. They get Ohio State, Michigan, Iowa, and Wisconsin all at home. The only tough road trip in the Big Ten they have, maybe Purdue. Is that enough for Nebraska to make a bowl? It's going to be close, but it's possible. The last tier, of course, Illinois. They're going to be the bottom of the barrel. They're rebuilding. Maybe they can get more wins, but I definitely don't expect the Illini to make a bowl in 2021. Number two, the ACC. Of course, Clemson will lead the way, but they do lose quarterback Trevor Lawrence, running back Travis Etienne, and wide receivers Amari Rodgers. However, wide receiver Justin Ross, he said he's coming back, and quarterback DJ Uiagalelei has proven that he's a legit quarterback in that game against Notre Dame in 2020. So I'm not worried about the quarterback position. Really, it's the running game. How is Clemson's running game going to look? Clemson's strong suit, at least to start the year, could actually be their defense. They have 10 of those starters coming back. So Clemson will look like a completely different team, at least to start the 2021 season. I do expect them to lose to Georgia, but after that, win out, get to the playoffs. Once you get to the playoffs, anything can happen. Right up there with Clemson is North Carolina. They have pretty much everybody coming back from last year except for running back Michael Carter. That might sting just a little bit, but Heisman Trophy contender Sam Howell, he'll be back. Most of that defense will be back. Mike Brown is recruiting at a high level. They don't draw Clemson, so I'm predicting North Carolina to make it to the ACC Championship out of the Coastal with one, possibly as an undefeated team. Right under those two is going to be Miami. Yes, D'Eriq King has decided to come back to Miami, but he hurt his ankle. Not 100% sure if he's going to be at 100% to start the 2021 season. But really, Miami only has two really tough games. The first one, well, it's the first game, a neutral game against Alabama. That's a loss. The one after that is at North Carolina. Now, if D'Eriq King is on a roll, doing great, maybe they have a chance to beat North Carolina. But if it's anything like we saw this past year, North Carolina should win that one. Other than that, Miami could have a 10-win season. I'm going to put NC State in the same group as Miami. NC State started looking really good towards the end of 2020, including a win over Liberty, who beat Coastal Carolina, who beat BYU. The only problem is they are in the same division as Clemson. So I'm going to have NC State second behind Clemson. After that, we have this little group. Boston College, Pitt, Virginia Tech, Louisville, and Virginia. Now, out of those five, I expect Louisville to make the biggest jump. Probably finish right behind NC State in the Atlantic, third place. But if they were to finish ahead of NC State, that wouldn't surprise me. I think Louisville is going to be a much improved team in 2021. Having said that, the rest of the bunch, Boston College, Pitt, Virginia Tech, and Virginia, I expect those teams to make a bowl. Right under those, I have Duke. I think Duke will bounce back. Well, sort of. I think they'll barely make a bowl. After that, I don't see any hope for Syracuse, Georgia Tech, Wake Forest, or Florida State. But if I did have to pick one out of that bunch to possibly make a run at a bowl, it would be Florida State. Things are starting to look a little bit better in Tallahassee. Number one, of course, going to be the SEC. But in 2021, I don't think it's going to be because of Alabama. I think it's going to be because of Georgia. They returned quarterback JT Daniels. I expect him to contend for the Heisman Trophy. I mean, let's face it, Georgia looked like a completely different team when he came in and started throwing the ball around. A much improved team. He'll be back. 5 great weapons with that wide receiving core and the tight end. It's going to be crazy. Georgia probably will have the best offense in the SEC. Barely right under Georgia is Alabama, and I don't think it's by much. Let's face it, Alabama is Alabama, but they lost a ton on offense. Mac Jones, Najee Harris, Jalen Waddle, Devontae Smith, That's a ton of talent to lose to not take at least a slight step backwards. I'm not saying fall off a cliff, they're going to be terrible, anything like that. No, slight step backwards. So I'm thinking 11-1 or 10-2. Probably more on the 11-1 side, maybe getting into the playoffs. That question can be answered with the answer to this question. How big of a step forward does Ole Miss take? I think Ole Miss could finish second in the SEC West. Lane Kiffin has come in and immediately injected offense and excitement into the Rebels. The question is, how close can they come to the champs? In the SEC East, I actually think Missouri will skip Florida. A ton of experience and talent coming back, plus a favorable schedule, and Florida loses a ton of talent. Georgia will be the top, and I think Missouri will be number 2. That third spot in the SEC East will be fought over Kentucky and Florida. Florida lost a ton of talent on offense. I mean, they lost pretty much everybody. I actually think that game between Florida and Kentucky could be the fight for third place. Now, in the SEC West, I think LSU can make a jump forward as well. Now, I don't expect the Bayou Bengals to finish ahead of Ole Miss, but if they were, it wouldn't totally surprise me. They have pretty much everybody coming back from last year's team, but last year's team was mediocre, so really how good of news is that? We'll see how that battle between LSU and Ole Miss turns out. That's going to be a fun one. I think Texas A&M goes back to being maybe a top 20 team, possibly taking that 4th spot. I just don't think they'll have enough offense to keep up with the upper half of the SEC West. Auburn, they can't make up their mind whether they want to be good or not. So what do? They fire Gus Malzahn and bring in Brian Harsin from Boise State. But guess what? This isn't the Mountain West. So I don't expect Auburn to have immediate success from this coaching regime from Boise State. I do think Auburn does have a legitimate shot to make a bowl, but definitely not contend for the SEC West. Mississippi State and Arkansas on the bottom tier. Those two teams are the toughest teams to figure out. Both have looked dangerous at times, but both have fallen flat on their face. If I had to pick out of the two, I probably would trust Arkansas more to make a bigger jump and try to claw towards a bowl. When it comes to the SEC East, Tennessee and South Carolina are in rebuild mode. Both fired their head coaches. Tennessee pretty much stole UCF's identity. South Carolina went outside of the SEC to get Shane Beamer. So the question is, which one will pay off sooner? We're going to find out in 2021. And then dead last, out of everybody in the SEC, is going to be Vanderbilt. But guess what? They went out and got themselves a new coach, Clark Lee, defensive coordinator out of Notre Dame. Maybe they're watching South Carolina and Tennessee trying to figure out who's the weakest out of those two and maybe try to pick one of them off to get out of that bottom spot in the SEC East. You never know. It could happen. That's all I got for you for this show. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you on my next show.